Hi, so here we are, the fourth and final week of Mechanical May with Bicentennial Man, starring Robin Williams and Sam Neill. Now this is interesting because it's actually based on an Asimov story, so not only are there going to be differences, which I'll try and cover off as we go, but of course there is the three laws which come into effect. And when you have an android who becomes self-aware, can you get past those three laws? It is something that I think we will kind of cover in a bit, but we'll get there in time, don't worry. So again, common thread, you know, it is a tool. He's an android butler. That's his purpose. He helps around the house like a normal butler would. He has the same kind of mannerisms and respectful, you know, sort of sir, little miss, mum, you know. And it is interesting because, you know, once again we have an unease with him. I mean, obviously Sir got him, so he's fine. The little miss seems okay with it. Miss less so, and Mum just no. She really doesn't feel comfortable. She finds him very unsettling, kind of like how Monica was with David in AI. You know, at first when he was very mechanical, and I suppose a bit later on when he was a bit obsessive. She has that same level of uncomfortability and not perhaps a distrust quite, you know, not quite at that level, but she's certainly not entirely comfortable. But, you know, he's there, they make use of him, and obviously Miss abuses him by telling him to jump out the window, which obviously then gives him sort of a personal privilege. It's one of the only times that I think we've seen something that's more robotic-like being given sort of a human level of respect quite early on. You know, when Sir says, yes, he is a thing, technically, he is a robot, but as far as you're concerned, he's a human, and you wouldn't tell a human to jump out the window. So, no, you know, drawing the line. So he gives him that sort of human level, which I do think helps create certain bonds, you know, with the family. As I say, particularly little Miss, he does form very strong attachments to. Insofar, you know, that he's trusted with her favourite toy, which obviously gets accidentally broken, and she's heartbroken. You know, she's only a little child, she doesn't understand. So that leads him into learning woodworking, you know, as a way of reparation. He can replace a little toy. But of course that starts to become more. He finds he enjoys it, and this is where there's a deviation from the original story. In the original story, he's less human, effectively. He doesn't enjoy it, he just sees a benefit to it, which I know it's hard for humans in a way to sort of grasp that concept. If there's a benefit to it, surely I'm enjoying it. You know, in most circumstances, but it's with him, it's not quite that level. And I think it does make some sense it makes it a little easier to just go along with it, I think, by changing that. But we see the early beginnings of, you know, creativity. He starts to make a bit more, you know, he's got a bit of flair to it, he's got a bit of his personality, even though his personality chip wasn't actually activated. So this, you know, it isn't like down the line, you know, it isn't a lightning bolt like with Johnny Five. It isn't that he's built to emote or to replicate emotions. He's just having a glitch, you might say. Now, obviously with this, you know, this idea that it may be a glitch, you know, it does encourage them to take him back, get him looked over. But even then, I mean, Sir doesn't just want him dismantled, because what's making him like this might not be there anymore. Mansky's very eager to just dismantle him and go, okay, it might be a whole product line issue, we need to know. He's looking at the bottom line. He doesn't want the company to have a very costly recall. Understandable. But, you know, Sir's like, no, and I've protected his brain. I mean, again, that's a deviation. He doesn't literally protect his brain, he just says don't do it, and they're kind of okay with it. But, you know, so rather than just give him back to Mansky and remove that individuality, he's like, no. I want him kept as he is. If you can't do anything to figure it out without breaking him apart, fine. Obviously, I know I'll have to come back and get repaired, so I've put a failsafe. Fair enough, you know, you can't say fairer than that. And it does start to give him the beginnings of freedom. Obviously, much later on, he gets proper freedom, which again is a deviation from the book, but I'll get there. But he's, you know, he's told that he can basically start to help, you know, make clocks and have less time to, you know, less time on the household duties. They'll pick up some of the slack. And it is quite similar to sort of early slave abolitionists, you know, who were like, well, you're clearly intelligent, it's not like all these people are saying you're less than human. No, you're clearly intelligent, and I want to nurture that. The worst people who had slaves, who could see the potential and encourage them and reduce their sort of household duties or their plantation duties, whatever it was. So it is a very interesting parallel to slavery. The fact that over time he's given more and more freedoms, like the right to wear clothes at the wedding, which then he's like, actually, I could do this full time. And I find that very interesting, how Sir is a really good role model. I think anyone else, like I say, would just be like, yeah, just take it well. Maybe others wouldn't be so nice, but I don't know if they'd literally be like, take him back and get it repaired. They might be like, no, let's see how it goes, and obviously we'll potentially bring him back. But the fact that he's given him so much encouragement to develop, to the fact that it then becomes a bit awkward because he is still property. However you cut it, he's been purchased and he's still property. Now, again, like with slavery, there is the issue that property cannot own property. This mug cannot own this pair of glasses, or vice versa, because they are property. Obviously, these are not living or sentient, but taking it to an extreme, property cannot own property. It's just not possible. And that's why we basically have the attorney coming in, to basically fight for Andrew's rights, because he needs to be able to sell these clocks to basically help him pay for his own upkeep, because otherwise he would have to, Sir would have to cover the cost of any repairs, although surely there's warranties, but we'll leave that. And this is, quite an interesting idea, the fact that, Sir is encouraging him to basically make his own income, to be financially free, if you will, to be self-supporting in that regard, and that's quite a massive development when you consider the slavery parallels. So, all these developments keep happening, and I mean, there is one tiny funny thing that I do have to mention when it's like, oh, do you want to see, like on a higher bit, and he does the eye twitch because he's now got a fear of heights, a very human thing. After being told to jump out the window, he's very wary of heights, and I love that. The fact they put that in, this human trait, to again encourage us to say he's more human than he appears. And like he learns to tell jokes. Not necessarily appropriately, but it's something to work on. His sense of humour at the beginning is terrible, and it's not brilliant towards the end. It's very much dad joke level, but he develops, and he eventually comes across the term freedom, and this is where it really kind of gets difficult for him and for Sir to maintain a relationship. Once he asks for his freedom, Sir is very resentful, almost. It's like, oh, I've done all this for you and now you want to go. Fine. It's like, I don't want to go, I want to be free. Well, you can't stay here because you wouldn't be free. We're not, that's not how it works. And it's the last part of, I think, this slavery metaphor. When he's released and told to go, and it's a very bitter ending. And I know Little Miss kind of talks to Sir about it later, about the whole idea that actually you've made that happen by encouraging him to develop himself, to be self-motivated, to decide his own fate. You've caused this, you know what I mean? I mean, in the original story, it's less harsh. He does leave the home, but he lives quite nearby and they visit frequently. In this, he doesn't see him until the deathbed, and obviously makes good, sort of comes to terms with it. They end on good terms, and it's a nice sort of parting of the ways. And then he realises that, if he's kind of like his own separate species to humanity, but he's, as far as he's aware, he's unusual, and he needs to know. So he wants to find more robots, and obviously seeks Lloyd's help. And I think it's great. Again, a very human trait, I would say. When Lloyd's kind of like,
so you'd be gone for quite a long time.
Oh yes, several years, if not more, if my calculations are correct.
I'd love to help you.
Did he not breastfeed?
So that comment just literally says, yeah, as soon as you knew I was going to be away for a while, you're fine with it, thanks. But of course, it is the catalyst that gets him on his way, and he seeks out more robots, generally not having much luck, and happens upon Rupert and Galatea, who are fabrications for the movie. They don't exist in the original story. But of course that leads to him getting the skin. He's obviously away for a while, but one of the things Rupert says about when he's making it for him is perfect.
The secret to all this is actually imperfection.
Imperfection?
Yeah. Things like wrinkles, less than perfect teeth, details like fading scars, little pop marks. Look at my nose. See my nose? It's bulbous and slightly irregular.
It is.
Well, I'm the only one who's got my nose, and that's what makes me me.
And it is true, we are recognised as much for our imperfections, our flaws, as for the good bits of us, much as we'd like to think otherwise. But, he goes home with Robin Williams' imperfect skin and terrifies Portia because, convenience of film, it skipped a generation and they look identical. One of the less good bits of this film, but, so he terrifies her and, they don't get on well at the start, but he goes home and takes in a dog. Now that's another very human trait, this compassion for lesser creatures, if you will. But it's a very sweet thing to do. It's this idea that you're taking something in to look after it. He wants to take care of it, and it does sort of help him get to speak to Portia a bit more and get an inroad. But he starts falling for her. Despite himself, and I think he doesn't even realise it at first. But I think maybe he's always had, like when Little Miss grew up, I think he's always had the potential there, and this just brings it back to him. Now he looks even more human, but he's still not there, and this is one of Portia's big issues. She can't grow attached to him because he's not mortal. And it's something that he struggles with, the fact that he has immortality and he has to watch everyone he cares for die. He's been granted almost like a reprieve in the fact that Portia does look so much like Little Miss, but this is like an anomaly. It's a once in a blue moon kind of situation. And this is what leads him to developing the organs. Where again there's another kind of difference between the story and the film, but it's minor. So I'm not too worried about it. The differences, but obviously with Rupert's help and Galatea's. Starts to create these replicated organs, which is great because not only can he have organs that are, that replicate the functions of humanity, but he can then sell them to further humanity to help. So while he's making himself more mortal, if you will, by having organs and having to eat and all this kind of thing, he's making humans less mortal by giving them spare parts. And we've already got, sort of the ability to replace certain parts with synthetic organs now, or have at least synthetic parts helping existing organs. So it's not an unrealistic idea, and this idea where he's committed to humanity. But of course we get into this weird ship of Theseus idea. Now you may be familiar with this, if not, there's plenty of videos out there, I've probably linked one above, to sort of illustrate the point. But the short version is, so you have a ship that you sail around, it needs repairs, so you put new bits of wood on, and over time you eventually replace pretty much every bit of wood. So at what point does it stop being the original ship? The similarity here is with these organs, putting these organs into him, and obviously putting these synthetic organs into humans whose organs are failing. Where does those humans becoming a robot, and where does this robot becoming human? Where is that line? And it is something that's mentioned obviously in these sort of World Congress hearings, with the old guy particularly at the start. He himself has organs that Andrew has devised. He's living because of Andrew, effectively. Obviously it's stretching it. I'm sure someone would have created something down the line, but because of Andrew he's there and he's able to make this judgment. So are they not actually closer than he would like to admit? And like I say, he is committed to humanity. He wants to see humanity thrive. He wants to help them live longer so that he doesn't have to see people die so much, but also, like I say, so there is the common ground. This is a very interesting one. It's almost like looping back to Chappie, where Chappie wants to put the consciousness of Yolandi into a robot, and obviously of Dion. You know, this is a similar idea, but it's the body rather than the consciousness that's changing. Make everyone on the same level. But through all these organs and through this sort of self-improvement, if you will, I mean, arguably it's actually self-deprecation, because he's making himself have more issues. You know, if he's needing to eat and things like that, he's making it harder. But to him, humanity is the pinnacle. He's like Data, from Star Trek. So, he's slowly becoming more human, and even though he can see the irrationality of love, so can we all, really. But he can't help himself. He's committed not only to humanity but to Portia. He wants them to grow old together, which is really important to her, because having a definite end goal, having a definite time when you will die. I mean, obviously no one has a definite end date, but having at least an idea, having a window, it's very important. We experience life as we do because we have a termination set somewhere in our future. So we want to make the most of the time that we do have. We want to maximise the benefits of our existence. And you can't do that if you're never going to die. You've got all the time in the world to do whatever you want. So it makes it harder to strive for perfection. And that's why I perhaps respect Andrew in the early part of the film, and Data, as I've mentioned him, because they want to make themselves more like humans. They want to better themselves in the same way, even though they could take millennia to do it if they wanted. So of course, he gets even closer and closer to humanity. Obviously he's declined originally by that old guy, which is quite sad. But it's a setback. But he takes it to heart, the fact that, one of the deciding factors is that lack of a termination point. And he does, as I say, he does definitely take that to heart. So when he goes back to Rupert and asks for the blood transfusion, he's making that final step. He's going, well, I'm going to have an end date. And I think that's beautiful. It's a nice way of doing it. And the fact that he says to him,
"It's a little vague, Chief. You don't know exactly how long I'll last?"
Sorry. Welcome to the human condition.
And that's beautiful. It's like none of us have a set date. None of us know to the day. And I think that's a beautiful way of doing it. Now, in the original story, he actually had like a degradation program, if you will, installed that made him wear out. It gave him a definite end point after about 200 years. And that, to me, still is not quite as close to human as, would be right, I guess, for want of a better word. I think this was a much better way of doing it. Have him, degrading due to blood in his system, and not having a definite date. And of course, he's there at the end with Portia, after having gone to a hearing and said, well, I'm going to die just like the rest of you. I'm aging, so give me a good reason now. It's like, okay, you told me last time the reason was because I won't degrade and die. Now I will. Give me another excuse. And obviously it's, very heavy, very difficult decision. And, has to go away. And of course he watches, and just before it's announced that he is a human in the eyes of the law, from the World Congress, across the globe, he's recognised as a human. He passes away. He's worn out. His time's up. But he didn't need to hear it. Like Portia says at the end to Galatea, it's like he didn't need to hear it. And then obviously she says, okay, turn off the life support. And it is a very positive ending. It sounds weird to say that because they're both dead at the end, but he got what he wanted. He was recognised as a human. He died a human with the woman he loves. That's what he wanted. He's succeeded. He's like Methuselah, he's 200 years old. He's the oldest man alive. Well, he was. So it's a very positive ending. Now, I did say, you know, that Galatea and Rupert were created for the movie, and I think it does help in some ways because, you know, there was a whole base on the moon where he was helping develop the organs and things. It would have been a bit convoluted, and I think it made it nice and compact. One of the problems, though, with Galatea not being part of the original story is they seem to have forgotten some of the 3 laws. Early on, I mean, I missed this one actually. Amy spotted this, you know, when Rupert's telling her to like carry stuff around and she's stropping around. She's not following the orders of a human being, which is part of the 3 laws. So that was an error. The one I spotted, you know, pretty obviously at the end, you know, when she's got skin and everything like that as well. She turns off the life support. Now, surely that breaches the first law. You know, to not harm a human or allow a human to come to harm. By turning off the life support, she's directly meaning that Portia will die. That surely goes against the 3 laws. Like I say, the first law, which is the one that supersedes all others. So even though she was given a direct order, if the first law would be breached, that voids it. So I don't know how that works. I don't know, you know, when she's been upgraded, whether she's got a similar level of humanity to Andrew to a degree, I don't know. But otherwise, I think it's just one of those little errors that doesn't really harm an otherwise, you know, very positive and, as I say, uplifting film, despite the ending. But I've enjoyed looking at these 4. You know, it's one of the topics that really interests me, how we integrate the mechanical into society. As we get ever more integrated, you know, with our computers, and we have the Internet of Things. You know, people have their homes controlled by a little box called Alexa. You know, turns the lights on, gets your heating ready when you come home, and you know, you can run your house just using the Internet of Things. You know, it's kind of terrifying, and I think androids and things like that are the next stage, and you know, being aware of the ethical implications and how would we act if they showed more signs of being human than we thought they would. So I'm going to give robotic things a bit of a break for a while, I think. That said, I know I've got a few in the pipeline, but I will be back next week with something. So until then, as always, take care.